And now we have the one, the only Styx Hex and Hammer 666. You know, when you're named that way by your parents, you pretty much have to end up in this kind of lifestyle. He is an independent political commentator and YouTube content creator. YouTube.com/Styx Hex and Hammer 666 and Twitter.com/Styx666 official. Styx, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Glad to be aboard, and Merry early Christmas, by the way.
Indeed. And I also wanted to give you massive props for overtaking the 70s and 80s band Styx in the YouTube search. That is a wonderful thing, a great band. But I will say I listen to you a little bit more than I listen to them now. So come fly away with Styx to the new frontier. So we're going to talk a little bit about Christmas. Those of us who have sort of public-facing personas, a lot of times people don't have much of a sense of what we do away from the camera. So what was Christmas like for you when you were growing up, and what was the environment that shaped how you enjoy this season?
Well, always when I was a kid, you know, we were more on the impoverished side. So it wasn't, you know, it wasn't anything elaborate. It was basically me, my parents, occasionally, you know, someone else would wander by. But for me, it was mostly about the food, and it always has been. It always will be. Like tomorrow, it's probably gonna be deviled eggs time. Got to make those. Christmas dinner is usually a boiled dinner, like a big chunk of ham, bunch of cabbage pieces. When I was a kid, I would slather ketchup all over everything. That was, you know, hilarious. Now a little bit less, but it's basically the food. You know, when you're a kid, you want to receive gifts. You know, Legos were always my favorite when I was a kid. When you get older, you're giving gifts more. But it can be an interesting time of year. I don't like the commercial Santa side of it, like, you know, all the radio stations. It's nothing but Christmas music. Even the rock station, it's like, please give me something else, anything else. I don't care.
Bruce Springsteen said the word Santa once during a 3-hour concert. We're going to play you that bit over and over again.
Yeah, I don't care if it's the softest rock of all. It's better than the really sappy stuff. But I will say I do like the sappy sort of like Year Without a Santa Claus, Rudolph, Shiny New Year. I admit I've got a soft spot for that sort of stuff.
All right. Did you ever have a present? Wait, sorry, just one moment here to complete the soul transfer. There we go. Your other rumor will remain unexplored in this video segment. Okay, did you ever have a present where you really had to grit your teeth and put on a happy face, but you just weren't feeling it?
Yes, sometimes I got clothes. But
that's got to be an aunt. That's an aunt thing. Here's some underwear and a sock.
That was a mom thing, actually. And no, I loved the hand knitted clothes. Like I always got like hand knitted socks, and they're so warm, they're comfy. And the added bonus, if you shuffled across a rug with them on, you could shock your father. And that was great because you say, "Whoops, sorry, that was an accident." And
now, hang on a sec. So when you were, because we used to do this when I was in grade school. You shuffle when you get the carpet. You get the library time one afternoon. You shuffle across, especially in winter when the air is like Kalahari dry. You shuffle across and you build up a truly X-Men style charge. And were you an earlobe guy? Because that to me was the one. I mean, if you get the earlobe with that kind of shock, you get a really exciting jump out of people.
No, I would always try to shake their hand, and then I'd like brush against their fingertips, and they'd be like, "Oh, it's so great." But
that's magic. It's a magic, and that led you to your later pursuits.
Yeah, the handmade clothes were always good gifts. Or like handmade, I had handmade hats, some of the sweaters and stuff. I loved that. I just didn't like, you know, the regular, like, oh, here's a bunch of socks. It's like, okay, that's great, but you could have gotten me more Legos with that money, honestly.
Did you have a Lego ceiling? In other words, did you ever say, before the Lego thing faded away, did you ever say, why, no, I think I have enough Legos for everything I need to do? Or was it just like absolute accumulation without limit?
No, it was infinite Legos. I still like Playmobiles, actually, because I have like the nativity scene, and I realized that they had Roman Playmobiles. And so there are going to be some, you know, kind of weird posts on Twitter, I think, over the next week regarding this.
And what was the best present that you remember getting as a kid?
That's a hard one. I would say... I was always into science, so it would have to be a tie between, I got a microscope one time, and it was like a pretty good one, and I was like, yes, this is great. And then I actually got also a videoscope set. Now the videoscope was less powerful, but it's like a microscope, but it has a screen. And it came with all these like samples, like little bug parts and stuff, extra slides you could fill with things. I actually, like one time I got a cut, and my first thought wasn't, oh, you know, I need to Band-Aid. My first thought was, I need to get this on the slide. So I'm sitting there, I'm like trying to get it to keep bleeding enough to put a drop on the slide, and I got that, and I'm like, yes, I can look at my blood. And it was like the greatest time ever. I would spend hours and hours looking at all this stuff. I had chemistry sets, an ant farm. Those were the best gifts.
Oh, yeah. No, I remember getting a telescope one year and learning how to map sunspots. You know, like you point the telescope at the sun, never look through it, and you get a white sheet of paper and and I spent like a week and a half mapping sunspots thinking I was contributing to science. And then, of course, the thought struck me that there might, in fact, be other people in the world doing this as well. And of course, pre-internet, you had no way to get this information to anyone. So that was a fairly short-lived career as an astronomer, but I love that stuff.
Use a fax machine.
That's right. Broadcast fax. Here's the sunspots for you lucky people. Sorry about all the ink use, but, you know, it's science. It needs that. Now, you've talked about, like, being a skinny guy and so on, because Christmas for a lot of people is like, I'll indulge in the food and then I'll spend all of January dieting. Do you ever bulge out at Christmas, or do you pretty much stay needle thin?
No, I've stayed a consistent weight for so many years. I mean, it's literally since middle school. I haven't really changed weight. I sort of buffed up a little bit then, and it was sort of, I had a stomach, and then I shot up several inches, and it exhausted all of that fat, and I've stayed basically the same since. I think I've gained like 5 pounds since I stopped smoking, but then I evened out, and I'm like, oh, this is fine. I'm still skinny, dude. So
how was that? How long did you smoke for? How long was it? How hard was it for you to stop?
For 3 days, it was hell. And after that, it got better. Actually, it wasn't as difficult as I originally thought. See, before I had always failed in the first day or two, like the last 2 or 3 times I had tried. But once I got over that hump of the 3rd or 4th day, it was like, oh, I can do this. And I basically stayed drunk for that first week nonstop. I am drunk in basically every video that I made in that period. I'm totally sauced, and almost nobody even noticed.
That's interesting. So you're a high-functioning alcoholic when you quit cigarettes. That's good to know. Now, of course, I assume the alcohol consumption is tapered down a little bit, because that's one sick vice to exchange for another otherwise.
Yeah, I was drinking off probably 15, 16 servings a day for that week.
Wow.
Glass after glass of wine all day.
Is that a recommended approach to?
I don't think so. Usually it apparently causes people to want to smoke more, but I was never like I'll have a drink and then go a smoke person. For me, it was always driving or after a meal. So the drinking didn't really cause me to crave it more.
It's funny, you know, you have to watch this too as an ex-smoker, because I met a guy, this is many, many years ago. He was in his 50s and he was smoking. And, you know, often you don't see people who are that old smoking. But he said to me, I quit for 15 years. He said, I quit for 15 years. And then in the middle of the night, for no reason, I didn't see, you know, they need to have warnings. If you're quitting smoking, they need to have warnings, unlike movies. Warning! People are going to be smoking in this movie, and they will be smiling, and it will make you twitch. But he said, I quit for 15 years. Said, I woke up in the middle of the night. I just had to have a cigarette. I went in my pajamas to a 24-hour convenience store, bought a pack of cigarettes, and I'm like, I'm just going to have 1 or 2, you know, just for old time's sake. And then, boom, the hooks were back in. The ring had taken hold of him. And so, yeah, you got to watch that backsliding. Even it can happen a long time later. And I also think if you run a convenience store and a guy shows up at 3 o'clock in the morning in pajamas, desperate for cigarettes, it might be okay to say no.
Yeah. Well, if I get to the point where I'm older and like I crave it, I wouldn't even necessarily care, because I'm like, well, you know, big worries, like you get cancer at 40, you're falling apart. You're like, oh, I had so much to live for. And then like when you're older, it's like, maybe, who cares?
So how has the year been for you for this? I think, you know, I've said this in the other segments as well. Christmas is a pretty good time to reflect. How has gaining increased public exposure affected your life, your relationships, your family, your friendships? What's it like for those who aren't out there, so to speak? What's it like from that promontory? Well,
people around me, like the very small number of people in my personal life, which I don't really talk about online because I want to keep that 100% private. I never talk about other people for the most part, just for their own security, because I realize there might be an Antifa member out there that wants to blow my head off, so I don't want to drag anyone else into that. Mostly they're happy about it, and you know, as you make more money too, you get more exposure. I sell more books. more donations come in, I'm paying down my student loans. That really helps me actually to make, I think, even more content because I'm under less stress. The fact that there's less stress means like, oh, yeah, I could take it easy, but now I'm just more ambitious because, you sleep better, you eat better, things are generally okay in life. And it's like, well, I'm going to make more content because this is great.
It's kind of funny, too, because I think that the camera has a tough time lying for people who are perceptive on the other side of it. So if you're kind of wound up and stressed and worried, you just can't have the same show as if you're relaxed and happy. And to me, that even is like if I have a good night's sleep versus not such a good night's sleep, it has an effect. Much though I try to sort of be professional, produce the same quality, it is kind of tough to be as spontaneous and positive. And this is one of the reasons why success breeds success, because you get that positive feedback, you get the income to the point where you can focus and be positive about things. And that allows you to do higher quality shows. The people who are kind of skimming on the edge, it's tough for them to be positive enough to attract new watchers and listeners.
The sleep is the biggest thing for me because I do have insomnia. So I'm like, it is a never-ending struggle to get enough sleep. I've got enough leisure to be able to do that so I can do at least the basics of what I need to do. But if I'm under more stress, like there were months and months that went by where I was like, I had to force myself to do work. And I was still doing it. In fact, I was doing in a literary sense, more than I am now. But it was out of desperation. It wasn't out of, hey, I want to do this. It was just basically, hey, I'm going to be screwed if I don't, honestly.
Now, what was going on at that? Was that when the demonetization stuff hit so many content providers? Because you don't monetize, do you? No,
demonetization didn't affect me. It was before that with my grandfather being in a nursing home, and one of our relatives was like, hey, trying to do a legal challenge for the property. So I was sitting there, I'm like, well, my income's not very high. I need to work 10 times harder. Because if shit hits the fan, I don't want to be, living off ramen for the next 6 months. Been there, done that. Not going to happen again. So I rammed through as much as I could. And by the time it was over and then that stress went away, I was actually doing fairly well. I'm like, oh, I guess I'm the agent of my own fortune.
Now, when it comes to your sort of public presence, public persona, what do you think are the biggest misconceptions that people have about who you are and where you're coming from philosophically?
The biggest one is they think I'm still a Satanist. Definitely. I get comments.
I did want to deal with that on the Christmas show, because if you get hit by lightning, I know that your windows are closed. If that were to happen, people need to know why.
Yeah, I haven't been a Satanist for many, many years. I'm a pagan. I don't have a problem like I did in the past with Christianity. I still oppose all organized religion. That includes the pagan ones. But a lot of people think that I'm still like, I worship LaVey or something like that, or I believe in an actual devil. I don't. I'm just not into that sort of stuff. If someone believes in the devil, okay, that's fine. Just, I'm not part of that. But it's really paganism for me is more cultural anyway. It doesn't have so much to do with, oh, those Christians killed my ancestors, I'll get them back, I'm going to worship Odin. It's not so much that. It's a togetherness. It's basically the same as like the Christmas thing. A lot of people, they don't even really believe in Jesus. They certainly don't believe in Santa. But they get together as a family, they eat, and they have fun. Paganism delivers that for people, I think, too. In many cases, religion in general can. In a cultural sense, even some of the religions that we criticize often. Someone's a Muslim. Someone might be just a cultural Muslim. They're like, yeah, I don't believe in Allah, but, the food's good. I think that's a positive thing for people generally.
Oh, you need a framework of belief. You need a framework of how to organize your life. How do you know if you're succeeding or not? Well, it has to be relative to some standard of value, to some standard of virtue. You have to have a way to organize your life. And one of the great mistakes of atheism was to ditch the framework of self-organization that religion offered without providing a compelling substitute. Well, I guess the substitute that the atheists generally provided was very compelling in that it was the state. The state will now organize your life and how to get things done. And instead of charity helping the poor, we're going to have a giant welfare state to make everyone dependent on it. And instead of sexual morals being enforced by the community, we're going to have the welfare state, a single motherhood. So I think that was one of the great mistakes, and trying to erect a framework of values and of virtues in a relatively post-religious world is one of the significant challenges, I think, that thinkers face.
Yeah, it's like I like to do some blasphemous stuff at Christmas, but it's not like I have a stick up my ass about Christianity. It's just something that I happen to find fun. The atheists abandoned, now it seems, classical liberalism. There's not so much as there was maybe 10 years ago a belief in personal freedom. It's going over to the other side. I see this with people on, the far left. They used to be like, stop the war and, press freedom. Now it's more like, you can only say what we want you to say. Proxy war is okay. That's a side issue. The world's going to hell, basically.
Biggest challenges that you see coming across the West in 2018. What do you think you're going to be spending your time pushing back against the most?
Fighting censorship, definitely. Censorship, and also if the right wing does continue to win, which I think that it will. In the midterms, I expect the conservatives, so-called, to do okay here in the United States. If they gain dominance and keep it too long, they'll become the authoritarians. We've seen it before. The Bushite Republicans, who aren't even like far right, they were abusive to people. They wanted mass surveillance. They wanted warmongering. My big fear is that even the alternative within not the alt-right, but the alternative right as a spectrum, my worry is that they'll become just as abusive as the alt-left has become. But that's my biggest worry, because then, we're screwed either way at that point, especially if it seeps over into the internet. People who are independent commentators like you and I, it would be a total screwiness for us.
Right. And it really is this kind of soft censorship. There is, of course, there's so many different layers of censorship. There's sort of the personal attacks and the slander and the attacks and you're a Nazi kind of stuff, which is designed to cast a magic repulsion spell around your content so that people won't even look into it. But to me, although distasteful and immoral, that's kind of fair game as far as free speech goes. But this suppression of videos and screwing around with algorithms and ditching sometimes subscriber counts and so on. There is that mechanical soft censorship that is occurring that, it's kind of tough sticks, because in a way it's like, oh, that's unfair. Ooh, that's terrible. In another way, it's like, challenge accepted. I will now have to become better and faster and stronger and more polysyllabic and with better jokes than ever before. I will do this show topless. I will get an afro. I will do whatever I need. I kind of like the challenge. If you're going to train for a race, if you have to run uphill, it's a crap at the time, but it might help you win in the end.
Yeah, that's a great point, too, and it helps alt tech a lot. See, I'm still very, very optimistic long term. It's just short term. We're going to suffer. For the next year or two, I don't see any real change in that. I think maybe it gets even worse in 2018. Our hope is that it doesn't, that we don't have to go through a sort of purifying fire to justify our own content. But in the long term, I think that any significantly abusive force gets laid waste to. It's like net neutrality as of the last hour. It's gone. It no longer exists in the United States. It was voted down by the FCC. I'm sure you've seen that. But it's not going to matter, because any ISP that actually tries to abuse people, it's going to get crushed underfoot by other ISPs. Even other corporate firms will edge in. They'll be like, we can make more money. So we'll just shove them aside without too much trouble. We're going to expand into their states.
Yeah, this all of these giant corporations that appear so monolithic and are, of course, at the moment, well, they go the way of all things. If you look 100 years ago, the top Fortune 100 companies, there's only about 4 left. Yeah. And so there is a natural churn of creative destruction in the free market realm.
Sears is definitely not one of them. Look at their tower.
Oh, yeah. No, just up here in Canada, I was going to the mall. My daughter and I love to play hide and go seek in department stores. And we have so many memories about Sears. And she's broken up that it's closing down. And it's rough, but so all of these monoliths, they rely upon the goodwill of consumers and reputation, particularly for high-tech companies. I co-founded and grew a software company, and the basic reality, you have almost no hardware infrastructure relative to your value. The entire value of your company goes down the elevator shaft every night on their way out of the office, and the goodwill of the consumer is everything. And if they mess with that too much, they will go the way of the dodo, and other institutions will arise to take their place, which will have a formal commitment in their EULA, in their commitment to their shareholders. They will have a formal commitment to non-censorship. That is how it's going to have to go. And I'm very optimistic. Again, in the short run, I agree with you. I think it's going to be a bitch and a half. But in the long run, I think either these companies will reform themselves or they will be replaced.
Yeah, it's going to be nice to see an internet that's run more by companies that are like, okay, we get it. We can't make as much money if we censor things because it takes a lot of effort. It takes a lot of time. It's going to boil down to their wallets. Governments aren't going to be willing to subsidize that crap forever. It's going to be wonderful.
So Christmas message for your listeners, I guess, and my listeners as well. What would you like for people to take away in their thought parcel, so to speak, this Christmas season?
Peace on earth is wonderful, but oddly enough, sometimes you have no choice but to fight for it.
That's very, very true. Do you mind if I take us out? Do you mind if I close things off?
Oh, that's fine.
All right. Sup, you beautiful bastard. Oh, wait, no, that's the wrong guy. Hang on. Here we go. Are we going to do one more? One more, because people are going to say spoon clank intensifies. There you go. And all right next to the mic. There you go. And that's about all. Peace out.